to the rule of economy in teaching grammar. So next slide, please. Palihog ko next slide. So the concept of economy in language refers to achieving effective communication with minimal effort and resource use. Similar to how economy in its Greek origin, from oikos, house, and nemein, to manage, means efficient management. So the word economy comes from the Greek word oikos, meaning house, and nemein, meaning to manage. So in simple terms, it means efficient management when applied to language. Economy means communicating ideas clearly, using the fewest word and the least effort, but still making sure the message is complete and understandable. So in linguistics, this idea follows the principle of least effort, which says that people naturally choose the simplest, shortest, or most convenient way to say something, as we say in the rule of economy. Like, for example, we often say TV instead of television or photo instead of photograph. So that's language economy in action. It saves time and energy while keeping meaning clear. So this principle controls and balances internal and external forces such as linguistic change and contact to maintain clarity and efficiency in communication. Now, this concept doesn't just apply to how we use the language. It also guides how we teach grammar. The rule of economy in teaching grammar means that teachers should aim to teach grammar in the simplest, clearest, and most efficient way. A scholar named Vicentini studied 450 early modern English texts like grammars and spelling books written between 1569 and 1799 to see how aware people were of this principle. He found that only 6% of these texts actually talk about linguistic economy. And since during that period, linguistics was not yet a formal science and the idea of economy in language wasn't a central topic. It aligns with the principle of least effort, suggesting that the speakers aim to communicate with the least possible energy expenditure, like what Vicentini studies is all about. So instead of overwhelming the students with too many rules or technical terms, we focus on what's most essential and useful for communication. Another example, instead of teaching 10 different tenses all at once, we can start with the most commonly used ones. So this way, our learners can apply grammar naturally in real life communication without confusion. So, in both language use and language teaching, economy means being clear, practical, and efficient. We manage our words and our lessons wisely, using only what's necessary to achieve effective communication. So, for further explanation, may I call on the next reporter?
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Can I have the next slide? So this scarcity is attributed to the lack of formal linguistics. Ah, okay, go. That's it. So The linguistic economy in the 20th century. According to Andre Martinet and George Sims Martinet's Economy, this changements phonetics in 1955 gave the classic definition of linguistic economy as a balance between communicative clarity and human laziness, or what we call inertia. So this principle defined by linguists like Andre Martinet and George Zift in the classic way to explain how language changes. So what it means, by the way, in this phrase. Language constantly tries to find a balance between two things, which is the laziness, the human laziness rather, and the communicative clarity. So, in speakers' need for ease, speakers naturally want to use the least amount of effort or inertia when talking. So, this leads to things being shortened or simplified rather. The next thing is listeners' need for clarity, wherein listeners need the message to be clear so they can easily understand it, or what we call communication. Next is human nature seeks minimal effort, favoring fewer, simpler units, which is Zim's principle of least effort in 1949, being inspired by Martinet, emphasizing that language evolves toward maximum efficiency with minimum effort, or the non-economical changes that hinder comprehension are naturally eliminated over time. So according to Zif's key role of 1949, language always moves out toward being as inefficient as possible because it uses the least amount of effort for the speaker while still making sense to the listener. That's why the result for that is any language features the cause of unnecessary effort for the speaker or are too complex to understand will naturally disappear over time. So can I have the next slide? Okay. And here in the earlier interpretations of economy before Martinet or the several scholars recognize similar ideas. First is Joseph Vendries in 1939. He linked economy to phonetic and grammatical simplification, viewing it as an effort to achieve clarity through elegance. Am I right? Wherein he linked the economy to the phonetic and also in the grammatical simplification. Next is Paul Passy in 1890, which is he proposed two opposing forces, which is the economy or ang pag-reduce sa effort, and then the emphasizes wherein he preserved the clarity, and then Henry Sweet on 1888 is he identified two types of economy, which is dropping the superfluous sounds and easing sound transmission. While here, and Henry um, Henry Free in 1929, he described balance between the clarity and also the expressivity, which is rejecting the law of wherein it is the frequent words losing force. And then Werner Leopold on 1930, he observed that we have two tendencies toward distinctness and economy, which is it leads to shaping the linguistic evolution. And then Walter Towley in 1958, he listed five forces in linguistic change, which is he include the clarity, the ease or the economy, the emotion, and also the aesthetics and the social impulse. And then Albert de Groot in 1931, he spoke of tendency toward maximum efficiency and in economy phoneme organization. And then for the last one, which is Coedrod's 1953, he defined linguistic economy as implication na even at the cost of expressiveness, Martinet rejected theological or the goal-directed explanations. And he also saw linguistic change as casual and functional, occurring because language must adapt to communicative needs, wherein the language change because they function. That is why in the Martinez definition is he defined linguistic economy as a way for language to become a more serviceable or more useful by making the greatest possible savings for the speaker without hurting the clarity or the message. So this means speakers always want the easiest way to talk, but the language must stay clear for the listener. Okay, and that's it. Thank you. So can I have the next presenter?
Okay. Now that we've understand how the principle of economy developed during earlier studies, let's move on to part 3, which focuses on linguistic economy in early modern English, text from 1582 to 1799. During this time, several grammarians and writers describe English as an economical language. When we say economical, it means that the language is simple, efficient, and of course, easy to learn. In other words, English was seen as a language that could express ideas clearly without using too many words. For example, Robert Bloch during 1762, he called English as the simplest of European language. Another example is John Collier. During during 1735, he also said that English speakers are sparing of words and syllables. What does that mean? That means they tend to use shorter and fewer words when speaking or writing. And last example is we have here White during 1761. He noticed that English people love using abbreviations and monosyllabic words. Those words are one syllables, like cat, run, and of course home. So this example shows that English was admired for being practical and direct. The use of short words and the lack of inflectional endings like ed or ing in some cases made it easier to communicate. So, in general, English was viewed as a language that values simplicity and clarity, doing more with less effort. However, not everything about English during that time was considered economical. When it comes to phonetics and spelling, many authors thought that English was actually uneconomical or inefficient. For instance, we have here Ben Jonson during 1640. He criticized that the use of extra or redundant letters such as Q and JH. Another one is Care in 1687 also pointed out that some words have the same spelling but different sounds. For example, words like red and red past tense like read. This made English confusing and inconsistent, right? We also have here other writers like Mulcaster, Johnson, Hodges, and Aiken. They also complained about irregular spelling and the lack of a clear match between how words are written and how they are pronounced. Because of this, many people at that time suggested simplifying English spelling to make it more logical and efficient. Even though the term linguistic economy wasn't officially used yet, these efforts to make English simpler and clearer already reflected the idea behind it. They showed that people were becoming aware that language should be easy to use and understand. So, to sum it up, this part shows that during the early modern English period, English was already recognized as an economical language. This means English is simple, brief, and efficient in communication. At the same time, scholars began noticing problems in spelling and pronunciation and started thinking about how to make the language even more efficient. At this juncture, allow me to call the other presenter to summarize this part.
Good morning once again. And we have, please, the next slide. Vicente Tini concludes that even though the specific term economy was not often mentioned in the grammar books of early modern English, the idea behind it was already understood and practiced. During that time, many writers and grammarians valued the qualities of simplicity, brevity, and efficiency in language use. They believed that good communication should express ideas clearly without unnecessary words or complicated structures. This shows that even before the concept was formally named, people already recognized the importance of using language in a practical and balanced way. Later on, well known linguistic theorists such as Andre Martinez and George Zip helped develop and formalize this idea. They introduced the principle of economy as a universal rule that exists in all languages. According to them, every language naturally tries to maintain a balance between two important goals. First, clarity of communication, making sure that meaning is understood. And second, effort reduction, using the least amount of energy or words possible. So, in other words, speakers and writers always look for the most efficient way to share their message without losing meaning. This principle explains why languages change and evolve over time. As people continue to communicate, they find shorter, simpler, and more convenient ways to express their thoughts. Over generations, these small changes accumulate and shape the language into something more efficient and adaptable. So, to conclude, Vicentine's conclusion highlights that the economy principle or the principle of economy plays a key role in how languages develop. It ensures that the languages remains functional, practical, and efficient, allowing people to communicate more ideas using fewer words or simpler forms. In essence, the principle shows that language is not static. It constant it constantly adjusts to human needs, aiming to do more with less while still keeping communication clear and effective. And that's the end of our here's the references, please. Yeah, here's the references, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening.